fun begins.
How's it going?
Hello.
Well,
Greetings, young Jedi.
hello there.
What's up, everyone? Hybrid Toy Reviews here, and today we are taking a look at the Star Wars The Black Series Boba Fett as he appears in the Book of Boba Fett. This figure is incredibly overdue. So we do have a Boba Fett in the Book of Boba Fett figure line, but it is not the Book of Boba Fett. It is the Mandalorian Boba Fett. In the Book of Boba Fett, he wears actual, pants that are, fitted to his legs, whereas in The Mandalorian, he was still wearing the Tusken robes under his armor, so his pants were very poofy and stuff. It's a costume change, and basically what happened, it was shown in some behind-the-scenes featurette for merch on Disney Plus for the show. The Boba Fett and Fennec Shand figures were going to come out in the Mandalorian line, and then Hasbro got told, hey, Book of Boba Fett's coming out, and they're like, okay, and they changed the color on the box, is all they did. And that's fine, get quick and easy merch for the show, but it's got to be accurate. And so while that figure is a good figure to have and put on your Mando shelf, this is the Boba that you truly want for your Book of Boba Fett shelf. Also worth noting that that's not a deluxe box. It's finally over. The Boba Fett tax is over. Alright, as I mentioned, this is the standard figure packaging. For the last, 5 or 6 Boba Fetts that we've gotten, they were in the wider deluxe packaging, even though they weren't really all that deluxe, There was definitely a feeling that Hasbro was just kind of like, you like Boba Fett, don't you? $5 extra, please. And so yeah, this is your standard Black Series packaging. Boba Fett is finally back to $25 or $27, exactly where he should be. So, standard packaging, Black Series logo above a big window showing Boba and his accessories off nicely. Book of Boba Fett in that kind of camo green, warning 4+ Hasbro. Number line in the Book of Boba line, and it just says Boba Fett. This side features some really cool artwork of Boba standing there holding his blaster, his name at the bottom. This side features your wraparound stripe and a Black Series logo. Round back has that zoom in of the side art with the palace behind him, looking nice. Black Series logo. A bio about Boba Fett in many languages. Pause and read whichever language fits you best. Number 9 in the line once more. A bunch of legal stuff, Disney, Hasbro, barcode, more legal hoopla that no one's going to read. Very standard action figure box. Let's open them up. So here we have Boba Fett out of the packaging, and we are going to buzz through his accessories first, as normal. So we'll start with his weapons. He comes with 2 blasters that we've seen before. These might be new sculpts, but we have seen these on prior Boba Fetts. He comes with his new pistol from the Disney Plus era. It is this kind of neat double-barreled looking thing. It's very spindly and skinny, but it's just very cool looking. It is in dark gray plastic and features a little bit of brown paint on the grip. Looks really, really nice. He features a working hip holster, which allows you to just push the blaster in like so. It is nice and secure. It is not a loose fit, and that is nice and securely stowed away at his side. And then he comes with his, I believe it's called the E11 blaster. This is his original trilogy, traditional type of shotgun-looking blaster. Has that heavy wooden stock with the sculpted, I'm getting to focus, that sculpted on, attachment on the side. It's in a dark gray plastic with brown paint on the stock as well. And it features that top-mounted scope, comes down to a very small, blaster barrel at the end. And this is very, very familiar to Boba Fett fans. He's carried this for, well, as long as we've known Boba Fett. He doesn't have any kind of storage for this when he's using it. He's just got it in his hands. Setting that off to the side, he comes with his jetpack. This looks very, very nice. It is in that dark green, kind of like khaki green plastic. Features some sand blue paint on it, little touches of red here and there, little white symbol right there. There are just touches of gold on the tip of the missile and the fuel tanks. The thrusters feature those peg holes in the bottom, so you could put those flame effects in, if you still have them, from the Return of the Jedi Boba Fett that came out all the way back in 2020. It's kind of funny. those have only been put out on one figure ever, and every Mando since has those thrust holes. It's just kind of funny, you know, if you've been collecting all these Mandos, you know, you've got about 20 guys that could use them, but only one of them can be using them on your shelf if you're, you know, not buying duplicates of that Boba to have them. So it's kind of just funny that that's how that all ultimately worked out. But anywho, the missile is removable, unclips like so, it pegs in, and gosh, why is my camera not focusing? But it pegs in like so. Nice and secure. It features the peg hole in the back and then the 2 slots up top. I have seen some people talk about it not being the best fit. Now, you have to put it through this rubber overlay on the torso, but there is a receiving hole down in there. And if you look at the peg, it is slightly downward angled. So I have found that if you line everything up and then you really push slightly down while you're putting it on. I mean, you really have to, like, work it. It does grab fairly securely. You know, I'm holding them by the jetpack and nothing else. And there, it just started to work loose, like, on that final, like, shake. Like, it, you know, it will hold on, you know. Other characters with jetpacks hold on better, you know, so, like, it's still worth mentioning. But, like, it's not falling off on mine. You just really gotta work it in. When you actually take it out, you see there's some little indenting now on that peg. So I really just think that like receiving hole snugs up at the very bottom, and you just really got to work it all the way into there. And then once it's in there, you know, it's in there. This rubber overlay, you know, you can kind of see like it pushes in a little bit. So it's like when you're putting that jetpack on, you got to kind of push in on it to where it pushes the overlay kind of flat on the back to get all the depth out of that. But spinning him around, looking at Boba, he does come with one more accessory. It is his iconic helmet. It is in that kind of nice, like, camo khaki green. Worth noting, it is a different shade of paint than the chest armor, and they're really supposed to be about the same, and that is somewhat frustrating, I will say. Another thing that's frustrating with the helmet, there's a little bit of misshapenness going on. You see the top's a little bit flat. We're going to fix that in this video. I'll tell you why it's there. But it's a little bit flat, which is frustrating. The deco otherwise is nice. The maroon around the visor itself is very glossy. Features the yellow on the side and the working fold-down rangefinder. And the little dent is sculpted in there. You got all of the orange tally marks around the side. The maroon band goes all the way around. It is a darker green lower and the lighter green up top. And the big frustrating thing on this, beyond the top being a little bit misshapen, is when you put it on his head and you push down all the way and you bottom it out, you know, his whole chin is like sticking out, you know, and like right from the front, you know, you can like see his neck, you know, especially when you like push down the overlay a little bit. And, you know, you get him in like a battle pose or something, you know, you don't see it so bad. But what has ultimately happened here is, if we look inside, there is a helmet insert. I've scratched it a little bit because I've kind of been messing with it a bit already. But this insert, my assumption on this insert is, on a lot of these removable helmets, people talk about sometimes they can become a little bit warped. So my assumption is they put this insert in as like a second layer of protection to maybe thicken the top, to you know, make it a little bit harder to bend. But the thing is you know, they use so much super glue that when they gnash it in, you know, it flattens the top down to match it, and that's maybe not what it needed to be. So I'm going to show you really quick how easy it is to fix this helmet. It really takes very little doing, but you can take some pliers, or I don't have pliers handy, but I've got these snips, so I'm just going to not cut. I'm just going to use them as a grabbing tool. You see, I'm just pulling it out, fighting the super glue. Keep on going. There we go. You see, all that super glue is right there on the top. So it's like, you know, they glue it down to it. It's interesting that there's sculpting in there for the padding and the dent. Interesting. But now that that's out, there's a tiny bit of super glue residue up in the top, but nothing really adding any height. Putting it on now, I mean, that fixes a lot of the chin issue, plus I got the head kind of facing down in there, but you get it aligned in there now, you know, you can get it a little bit lower on there. And now I'm going to pause the video really, really quick. Like, I'm just going to go run this under a little warm water. And I'm back. I was in my bathroom for about 2 minutes, just running some warm water underneath of this, and then kind of putting my finger in it to kind of push that bow up, and then running it back under some cool water. As you see, there's a little bit of permanent elongating to the helmet, but it's not like indented in the top anymore. And just putting it on the figure now, you see a little bit of that neck in there. You get it. I'm going to do a little bit more of a proper pose. You know, it's not perfect, and I'm not saying that you should have to do this. I'm just saying, you know, like some people are saying that it's like a fatal thing, and I'm like, no, just pop the insert out, you know, run it under some warm water, it'll be fine. But just showing you how you can save it if that is something that you are willing to do. And now taking that off, let's look at the rest of this figure here. As far as I can tell, he is 100% new sculpt, which is always nice to see on a figure. Now, the Tamura Morrison likeness is pretty good. I do like it a good deal. This is definitely his like episodes 3 onwards of the series, you know, done with the back to tank, where he's got some very subtle face scarring, but you know, he's not all rough anymore. And you know, he looks like Tem as far as I can tell. It looks pretty good. Now, working our way down, this whole chest is an overlay, and I kind of get the feeling through it that underneath of this overlay almost isn't like a skinnier torso like a lot of figures have. Like, it might be something a little bit more skeletal with the framework. I'll explain why when we get into the shoulder articulation. But working our way down from there, he has all of the standard Boba Fett armor things that you would be expecting to find on a figure. It is that dark green chest plating. They could have, probably would have just been fine to just fill it with red paint. But these 2 lines here were supposed to light up with the numbers and stuff. I've seen figures before just fill those 2 lines with red paint. It's a little bit dull looking without it, I will say. But it is what it is. He has the Boba Fett like feather-looking symbol on his chest plate there, the Mythosaur on that shoulder pad. That one's just yellow. Working our way to the back, that back plate has a lot more sculpting than most Mando back plates do. It's kind of just a little bit more visually interesting, which is nice. Back of the belt doesn't have any paint going on, but it's usually under the jetpack, so like you kind of don't super see it. But he has new sculpting on the gauntlets. He's got that nice missile launcher there, looking really cool. He's got those buttons sculpted in. He no longer features the nub for the flamethrower effect from that Return of the Jedi Boba Fett. If you're not going to include the effect, you know, it doesn't really bother me so much, but it, you know, it was nice having that, you know, so, you know, you could use that effect, but I'm not going to lose too much sleep over it. The abdomen, like lower abdomen, like crotch area, is kind of like a skeletal thing underneath with a rubber overlay. And so that's, you know, there's like squishiness all over basically the torso, you know, from shoulder to crotch, you know, it's all rubber in there. But the belt looks nice. It's kind of a reddish brown plastic color. Honestly, it's like the same as the gauntlets. It's pretty similar. But they have, you know, gold on the buckle and on some of the cylinders. And then his holster's very plain looking. His pants look like they have some sculpted pockets. And then there's ribbing above the knee pads. Those are a little bit bright and doesn't feature any of the silver paint on the dart launchers on the sides. But with Boba Fett figures in the past, it's kind of been hit or miss. And then working down to the boots and to the toes, this was the figure's claim to fame. The toe articulation. People have been calling him Toba Fett since he got revealed. You know, people keep comparing Hasbro to these import figures, these $100 Mafex and Figuarts. You know, man, they come with this, they come with that. Why doesn't Hasbro do that? Well, Hasbro must be listening because they're starting to do some of these interesting things. You know, they aren't doing the ball joint wrists on every figure. This guy doesn't have that, which throws me a little bit, but the toe articulation is definitely interesting. It's not a benefit to me, but I'm not like anti-toe articulation either. You know, I didn't buy it because, oh my gosh, it has toe articulation. You know, I mean, I don't like toes that much, but you know, they're it's just interesting to have. Makes for some fun posing. You know, some of the figure photography done for this guy for the promo photos, the manufacturer photos, really make a point to put him in poses that emphasize it and do it. You know, you put some cool work in. You added toe articulation, so show off what you're doing. I like the soft goods on the little back, like, comma flap, you know, that he's got going on. I think that's better than traffic coning the legs. And then something interesting going on with these legs is the hip ball articulation. You know, they took away the thigh swivel like 3 years ago. People haven't gotten over that. They keep saying they want the ball joints on the hips to, like, really pivot. Well, these ones, like, really pivot to the degree that it looks a little ugly from the front. I also see this rubber overlay has come off of the... Let me try and recenter that a little bit. There's like a plastic like crotch piece in there, and then the rubber overlay like nests over it. So yeah, when you like rotate the legs, as far out as they'll go, I mean, you really get like gappy in there. It looks like those old DC UC figures from like the 2008-2012 period. But it's kind of just a figure where you're gonna find a pose that looks good on it and probably put it back on the shelf. But they've been listening. They gave you the thigh swivel on the ball joints you want, and it's just kind of somehow uglier than the thigh swivel we had before. But, objectively looking at it, I think it does suffer slightly from not being a deluxe figure for what it's worth, because some of the paint apps are a little bit bare. I know I was talking about the Boba Fett tax, finally being gone. But I will say, certain things like the darts on the knee pads and stuff, would have been painted were it a deluxe figure. But I'm generally happy with what we're getting for mainline prices. This is still a pretty good-looking head-to-toe new sculpt. To run through the articulation, it is everything that you're going to expect from a modern Black Series plus toes. It has the double ball neck, allowing him to crunch that far forward, that far back, and of course you can get all sorts of attitude in there and rotation. The shoulder pads are interesting. It's almost like they're like ball jointed in or something. You can 360 at the shoulder, and you get your butterfly in and out, but they also like shift up and down in there, and there's like a ring in there that they like go into, and I don't know if that ring is just loose or not. I think it's like you can like shift them up and down in the socket. They're kind of, I don't want to call it gummy feeling, but it's like, it just feels like there's a lot more going on than there should be. He has those single jointed elbows that go pretty far past 90, and then swivel at the elbow, swivel at the gauntlet, and then hands 360, of course, with his left hand going in and out, right hand hinging up and down. He has that mid-torso ball joint, allows him to crunch that far forward, which is not a ton. That far back, and you actually start to see an underneath of the overlay in there. Interesting. And then side to side, and you get some pivot, and then the legs can kick straight forward just about, back, a good little amount too, out almost all the way. Like I said, there's no thigh swivel, but it pivots on that ball joint to a ugly looking degree. And then the single jointed knees are interesting. They don't have that like front, like a molded piece that kind of hides the joint. So your maximum articulation on it goes past 90, but it's a little bit ugly. And then you can kind of like push the knee pad up to where you think it looks best. And I almost think in this case, the knee pad being closer to the thigh looks best just because it hides a lot of that knee. Because at least then, like you're seeing it underneath. There is a boot rotation. Really liking that. They're doing that on a lot more figures these days. It used to not be the case. And then the feet can pivot straight down, really far forward. There is a pivot in there to get him standing in wide stances with both feet flat on the ground. And then fixing that knee, the toe articulation goes all the way up and all the way down, so you can like pose him like stubbing the shit out of his toe, on the ramp of his ship walking out. So just everyday life things, I suppose. So yeah, he's there are things on him that are fiddly and a little bit frustrating, but my overall thoughts generally are still somewhat positive. So here's Boba Fett next to Fennec Shand and Kersantin, the other primary characters of his team from the series. My Mando is currently MIA. I am rearranging the collection room a little bit, and I don't know where he is, otherwise I'd have put him here too. And then I threw in a Stormtrooper who's just a standard 6-inch height figure that everyone should have at least one of, just to give you an idea of scale. As you see, Boba's rocking in right at about 6 inches tall. I feel that's pretty accurate. And he does look good next to Fennec and Chrysanthemum, even though, Fennec's case, she's a few years old now, and Chrysanthemum's a year or two old. Even though a lot of the figures from his show are a little bit older, I will say he generally looks very good leading the front of the pack. If you've got a little Book of Boba shelf going on, he's going to look very good on it. So, end of the day, what do I think of the new Boba Fett? I think he's pretty okay. There are things that are frustrating. He definitely did not need this piece of plastic glued up inside of his helmet. You pull that out, it fixes a lot of just the visual issues. I'm a big believer in my shelf test. You put it on the shelf, you take a step back. Yeah, it looks like Boba Fett. He's definitely missing some paint apps. The little silver on the knee missiles would be nice. The thigh swivel situation on this is just ugly as can be. Like, if the pivoting on the ball joint is going to look like that on figures, I want the cutback on the thigh, which I also don't like in general. Just turn the knee, people. But he looks pretty good, and he's pretty fun to pose. He's got a lot of unique articulation going on in the shoulder pads. The toe articulation is really cool to see them trying something new. I don't think it needs to become a standard, and I definitely don't think they need to start breaking up sculpts to add it. But in a case like Boba, where his boots are red up until the gray of the toe area, what's it hurting? Yeah, put it on. Yeah, generally speaking, I do like this figure. There are a couple little frustrating things about it. I don't think it's going to end up being a top 10 of the year or anything, but I'm just happy to finally have a Book of Boba Fett, and I think he turned out really good. So I like it. I recommend it. I recommend, as soon as you get it, yanking that little plastic insert out of the helmet, running it under a little warm water. It generally fixes it, and shouldn't have to do it. I will say, shouldn't have to be doing that. But just do it. It fixes it. It's not a hard thing to do. So that's where I'm at. Thank you all for watching. It means a lot that you did. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all the end of video stuff. I'm going to go work on something else now. So until next time, may the Force be with each and every one of you, and have a good day.